Hi, Lisa K. Donner here for Liberty Nation. With me today is Scott Cosenza, our legal affairs editor. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Lisa.
All right, well, the U.S. Supreme Court didn't hear any arguments, but they made headlines anyway in a case today. Can you talk about that a little bit for us, Scott?
Yes, Lisa, abortion is in the air, of course, with the Alabama legislation and various heartbeat bills that are been passed in many places around the country. This case comes out of Indiana, and Indiana passed an abortion restriction with two measures chiefly. The first was that the remains of aborted fetuses be treated like human remains, which is to say they either need to be buried or cremated. And the second rule was that abortions may not be elected. They called it a disability rule. So if a woman decided, for instance, she wished to abort her fetus because it had Down syndrome or race or sex, that Indiana law said those were impermissible reasons to obtain an abortion and disallowed abortion in those instances.
All right, so essentially, what was the Supreme Court's ruling? And didn't this happen under Mike Pence?
So Mike Pence was governor of Indiana when this law passed, and he signed it into law, Lisa. And sort of how it worked with, just to go back to the procedural aspect of it, this case was brought by Indiana to the United States Supreme Court, the federal district court that Planned Parenthood sued in. So the name of the case is Box v. Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood sued the state of Indiana to enjoin them from enforcing both provisions of the law. The district court, or the lower court, agreed. Then it went to the Circuit Court of Appeals, the Seventh Circuit, and they agreed with the lower court as well. They said that both provisions were stricken and unconstitutional. The Supreme Court, however, they didn't do what we sort of traditionally think of how a Supreme Court rules on a case, which is invite the litigants to argue before the court and then decide the case. In this instance, the Supreme Court issued a per curiam opinion, which is essentially a unanimous opinion that no particular justice gets credit for writing, and it just said the following: with respect to the fetal tissue issue, they said that law was constitutional, that the state of Indiana can go ahead and require abortion clinics and abortion providers to bury or cremate abortive remains. What had happened previously, Lisa, there were some stories that many people considered scandalous, where they were treating these aborted remains like they may do like some kind of a tumor that's removed from a person, just going to a medical waste disposal company. And with respect to the disability rule, Lisa, Indiana said that they cannot restrict abortions based on the motivations of the person seeking an abortion. So that was stricken down as impermissible. So it's sort of a split between the two rules that Indiana had instituted. One went sort of for the pro-life side, and maybe one went for the pro-choice side.
Okay, the one that supposedly went towards the pro-life side, didn't Sotomayor and Ginsburg dissent?
Well, it's sort of a little bit of a tricky wicket that we need not get into totally, but both Ginsburg and Justice Thomas wrote separately. They weren't necessarily judicial opinions because of the way this ruling came out, but it discusses their philosophy and rationale here. And Ginsburg said that she thought what the court did today was a waste of time, Lisa, and I have to agree with her, and I'll tell you why. You'll probably agree with me too. It's sad to say. I mean, pro-lifers will probably agree with this as well. What happened was the Supreme Court said that when the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that the disposal method of fetal remains was unconstitutional, they used a test, basically the rational basis test is what it's called, and they said this didn't meet that rational basis. So when the Supreme Court overruled the Seventh Circuit, they said it does meet the rational basis. But here's the thing. What they didn't rule was whether or not it violated some other provision. And how this works with appellate litigation, Lisa, is if that particular argument line wasn't argued in the lower court, then it won't be permissible to argue it in the later court. And so what Justice Ginsburg said was, this is a waste of everybody's time. And as a matter of fact, I want to check my watch and see, did the Planned Parenthood lawyers run to court, in the wake of this new ruling, and then file a new challenge, which they surely will, alleging a different basis, which, judging from Justice Ginsburg's language, at least, we can expect her and a number of other justices to vote to then hold that provision unconstitutional.
Now, my understanding is that Justice Thomas wrote quite a bit about eugenics.
He wrote, I think it was a 30-plus page screed, really, about Margaret Sanger and the eugenics movement. Justice Thomas is perhaps one of the more eloquent speakers about abortion and the legal implications thereof. He writes often about how the system that the Supreme Court itself has set up is untenable and gives the states little guidance for determining, and lower courts to boot, little guidance in how to determine these questions.
Well, this is very interesting, Scott. Anyway you look at it, the whole abortion subject is heating up now. Don't you agree?
Lisa, I think that's perhaps that's a massive understatement. The abortion issue and restrictions thereof are the dominant legal issue of our time with respect to constitutional law. And of course, part of this is because I think this was unsettled politically and culturally. We have a ruling from 1973 that was sort of forced down the throats of many Americans, and there was no consensus then. And that's why we have, even today, we're 45 years on, and we have these fights still ongoing.
All right. Thanks very much. Scott Cosenza, Legal Affairs Editor for LibertyNation.com. Thanks for joining us today, Scott.
Thanks, Lisa.
And thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our Liberty Nation YouTube channel and dial into LibertyNation.com. Thanks. Bye.